All right. Hello, everyone that's just starting to join, and hello to your AI note takers, which I'm seeing on the screen. But please feel free to turn on your camera. We did enable the camera functionality, so we'd love to see your faces if you're there and if you're willing to smile back at us. I'm Chris Ronzio, the founder and CEO of Trainual, and I'm really looking forward to this presentation today. So before we get started, before I introduce Casey and talk all about Cultivate Advisors and Cultivate Brands, if you're just getting settled, grabbing your drink of water, I'd love to know, first, where are you? And second, what are you hoping to get out of the presentation today? So why don't you put in the chat, just nice and simple, where are you dialing in from? And then if you've got a topic in mind, anything about the valuation of your business, about how to scale, how to remove the owner, just put those topics in there as well. And I'd love to start that conversation. So again, let me see in the chat, where are you from? Where are you logging in from? Real quick. Franklin. All right. Franklin, North Carolina, Montreal, Scottsdale, local. So our office is here in Arizona, near Scottsdale, if anyone's ever been out here. Awesome place for golf and hiking, and it's almost 100 degrees here now. Marietta, Georgia. I was in Georgia last week, actually. Cincinnati, Ohio. All right, we've got people joining from all over. I love to see it. So today, like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about removing that owner dependency and what that looks like. How can you increase the valuation of your business and constantly drive the enterprise value? You probably heard that removing the owner or having a business that can operate without the owner increases the value because it increases the likelihood that you can hand the keys to someone else and they can sustain the results that you've had. And so that is the meat of the conversation we're going to be having today with Casey Clark from Cultivate Brands and Cultivate Advisors. So let me just get into it. But before I do, I want to just give you some quick housekeeping. So first, this session is being recorded. I noticed some of you have some AI note takers. I know that's pretty common practice these days, but we will be sending the replay your way. So if you didn't get a chance to watch the whole thing, if you're trying to juggle and multitask, or if you've got someone else on your team you want to share this with, look out for that replay. If you've got a question as we're going through this, use that Q&A chat feature. So we'll have both Q&A and chat up, but if you've got a question, put it in the Q&A so that it'll go to me and to Casey, and we can hit all of those questions at the end of the presentation. The chat is open, like I said, so feel free to put your reactions, your hot takes, whatever it is, into that chat box. And then steal these tips. Everything that we're sharing here, all of the pages from the playbook, we like to say, are meant to improve your business. That's why we do this. And so Casey is an awesome partner of ours, and I'm excited for you to see all the content he has to share. So bring this back to your teams, put these concepts to work, and maximize the value that you get out of this hour. Okay, with that said, I'd love to introduce Casey Clark. So Casey, if you haven't heard from him or seen him before, he is a lifelong entrepreneur ever since he had his newspaper route, for anybody that remembers newspapers. And then he scaled a home services franchise to over 600 employees. Back in 2013, he founded Cultivate Advisors, which is an advisory firm that's helped thousands of businesses scale their companies. And today he's the managing partner of Cultivate Brands, which has expanded to multiple brands that support business owners around the world. He's got a team of over 125 people, and very impressively has landed on the Inc. 5000 for the past 6 years. I know Trainual's been on it for the last 4 years, and the longer you stay on that list, the harder it is to sustain that growth. So kudos to you, Casey and team. So Cultivate Advisors, one of those brands that I mentioned, is a business advisory firm that can help take your company to the next level. So all of their advisors have been previous business owners themselves. They understand what it takes to build and scale a business. And in pursuit of this vision of working with so many companies, this has led to year over year double-digit growth in revenue and profits for a lot of the companies they work with. And so Casey and his team know how to scale. They've done this in over 100 industries, clients around North America, and I'm so excited to introduce him to all of you to share his knowledge with us. Casey, thanks for joining.
Chris, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So I'm going to hand it over to you to talk about increasing the enterprise value of your company. So you could take it away, and I'll just sit back and learn as well.
Appreciate it. All right, everybody, welcome. Really excited to dig into this conversation on enterprise value. And as we get started, I want to go straight to the chat here if you don't mind. How many of you currently lead the business on enterprise value? You just give me a quick yes or no in the chat. That's all I'm looking for. Just trying to get an idea of what does this look like in terms of how have people approached enterprise value in the past here. Let's see if anybody's chatting for us here. Everybody's afraid to post. There we go. Thank you. Thank you for being brave to say no. Any others here in the room that have? Don't worry, I won't call on you if you say yes. Just trying to get a quick pulse of how many people. Most are coming in as no, which is usually the norm. That they don't run the business on enterprise value. Awesome. Okay. And if there are a couple, this will still be really educational. But I think for those that have not maybe thought of running your business on enterprise value, this is probably going to open some doors for you and help you think a little differently about the business. To give you a high level, again, Chris already shared, and thanks for that bio read. I've only been an entrepreneur. That's always been my background. I've always been obsessed with the idea of creating and growing. And my father started me at a very young age, not knowing it. He was not an entrepreneur himself. He worked at a factory, and every time I wanted something nice, right? If I wanted to play travel hockey or get a chance to go get a BMX bike as a kid, it was here's a bucket, go knock on doors for $5 and wash cars or mow lawns so I could get to college. Some of you in the room as entrepreneurs may have some similar experiences. But yes, my first business, I learned the opportunity of what does it mean to grow and scale a firm at a pretty decent size. But I became obsessed with the idea of what is the wiring of entrepreneurs and why do some entrepreneurs make it so much further than others with the same training, the same resources, et cetera. And so I set off and I founded Cultivate Advisors, as Chris shared there in 2013. And all we do every day is help companies increase their enterprise value. And we'll talk more about this here in a moment. That doesn't mean to just sell the business, actually. We're going to really slow down and define what is enterprise value. But what we're doing is we're helping owners enjoy their business so much more along the way. And so, yeah, as Chris shared as well, we've expanded to all kinds of firms, from having our own outsourced finance and accounting firm to having our executive team company, as well as we've even got our own software organization that helps you track enterprise value along the way. So why did you decide to start or buy this business? A lot of you will probably have similar answers. Again, if you don't mind, one more chat here just so we can get into the groove, and then I'm going to start to really kind of dig in. But what was some of the outputs of why you chose to start this business? Would love to just get a couple examples there in chat real quick. Why did you decide to start or buy their business? So Chris hit right on the punch of freedom himself. He wanted freedom. Why else? Yep, that autonomy, be in control. Absolutely. Be my own boss. That's important. Wait for one or two others here to trickle in. So if you're thinking about typing but you didn't, go ahead and type for me. Physician practice, very, very common, Kelly, that's the route many will take. Daniel says freedom as well. Helping the community, Steve, love that. That's fantastic. Most reasons, right, are either autonomy or didn't like who I was working for, thought I could do a product or service better, wanted to be in charge, wanted to create a legacy, right? But they all kind of distills down, and you all knew where I was headed with this already, was freedom, right? And my experience is the best way to create freedom is actually to run the business on enterprise value. Because the question you have to ask yourself is, do you actually have freedom right now? Are you a victim to the business? Are you trying to keep, is the business really running you, or are you running the business? That's the question. You've probably heard that before. But at the end of the day, is that the reality of your situation? And so often what we find is when we look under the hoods of all these businesses, we find that the business is extremely dependent on the owner of all varying sizes. Now, obviously, if you're in the room and maybe you're a solopreneur, well, it makes sense that most of it's going to be on you at this time and at that stage of the business. But once you're beyond that and you start to bring on a team, you have to build the business a very specific way. And I want to help really shift your paradigm today. My goal is to help you shift this paradigm from right now, you're most likely running the business on revenue and profit. And I'm going to ask you to start to run your business on enterprise value. And I'll break all this down for you today. But the idea here is that revenue and profit is just a leading indicator. And let me give you a really quick example of how I know this is the case. I have seen the business at 10 million in revenue, 2 million of profit, and another business in the same industry, 10 million in revenue, 2 million in profit. Same two companies, and I've seen them go out to market and I've seen them trade, one at 14 times and I've seen one trade at 4 times. Same industry, same revenue, same profit. Why did one of them get 3 or 4 times the multiple at the time of transaction or at the time of exit? Who cares if you don't want to sell? Why would the outside market value one company so much more than the other? That's what enterprise value measures that revenue and profit will not measure. I can ask all of you the question, would you rather have the company that's doing $20 million in revenue and 2 million of profit? Or would you rather have a $5 million revenue company that has $3 million of profit? Hear that again. Do you want to run a $20 million company with 2 million of profit? Or do you want to run a $5 million company with 3 million of profit? Most of you will probably say the latter. You're more excited about the 3 million, 5, it'll be simpler. Well, the problem is what if I told you that $2 million was actually going to trade at 20 times multiple versus the 3 million in profit was all government contracts. It was only going to trade at a 2 to 3 times. Well, then I could shift all of you so quickly back to having a desire to have the $20 million firm with the $2 million profit. So this is what I mean. If you're not tracking enterprise value, you can't actually keep score in the business. Because here's some mind-blowing stats that are happening in the market right now that most entrepreneurs are not aware of. Their head is in the sand. 30% of businesses that go on the market sell. Let me repeat, 30% of businesses that go on the market actually sell. 1 in 3. 1 in 3 companies. Imagine real estate. If we put our house on the market and our odds were only that 1 in 3 would sell. Talk about just a total transformation of our mindset. We would approach real estate completely differently. So, but then of this on businesses, only 10% of the businesses that actually sold received the value they expected. Let's do some quick math here. 10% of 30 is 3. So 3% of businesses that go on the market actually sell for the value they expected. 3%. So you all have to look yourself in the mirror today and you have to ask yourself, again, even if you have no desire to sell, would you get the value placed on your business that you expected? Right now, in today's market, only 3% of entrepreneurs can share that. 3%, that is it. So you maybe wanted to create freedom and you wanted to have this opportunity, but are you actually going to capitalize on that freedom and then be able to enjoy the business along the way? This is another really interesting part. This was put out by Exit Planning Institute. We're really big partners of theirs. But nearly 50% of all business exits are involuntary, meaning the owner did not choose when it was going to sell. And it's often forced by dramatic factors. And for those that aren't having involuntary exits, if you ask the other portion, 79% have no plan. And I imagine if I put up a poll right now and I asked all of you to participate and share, how many of you have a very clear exit strategy and plan put in place? We would usually see about 60 to 80% within this same range would come up and say, I really don't have a core strategy for that. Now, again, I don't care if you want to sell or exit this business ever. What I'm trying to help instill today is that you may not have a choice. The reality is we call them the 5 Ds. You have no idea death is around the corner. Don't mean to get so dark, but the reality is you don't. Disability, you might have an accident or something that causes a disability that pulls you out of the business. A lot of reasons why we see that the exits happen is divorce. A lot of people don't realize that you don't want to give up the equity inside the divorce. So what ends up happening is you have to have some type of liquidity or sale of transfer to allow that liquidity to get out to pay the other partner. Disagreement, we're seeing this more and more companies start up with partners and they get misaligned. And then the last one here is distress. And I'll change that word to something even easier that most people know today, disruption. Obviously, you've got AI. For those that didn't think distress was a possibility, then COVID happened. We all saw kind of some of the fallout that affected a lot of different industries and companies at that time and horizon. So the reality is you can't always control the 5 Ds. And so my plea to you, my plea out of just truly the authentic belief that each of you are probably building something very unique and very special in your business, should have the ability to run your business with confidence, that you will also set up a future legacy, a future lifestyle, and truly establish freedom, even if you plan to sell in the short term or no desire to sell, because at some point it is going to either transfer sustainably to another partner, or it's going to go through multiple generations if it's family business, or you will at some point unload the business because you're not going to live forever. That's just the reality. And so I like to think about these 5Ds with my father. I helped my father build a business after I had a lot of success in the painting space, exterior painting franchise world. I came to my father who, like most middle America, had no money saved up in retirement. Was just not in a position to have retirement. Always wanted to take my wife on my mother on amazing trips and different outputs. And what I slowed down is I said, Dad, let's retire here early from this factory world. Let me teach you how to run this business. And we got that off the ground for a few years and built it to multiple million bucks. And then he passed away. In fact, he passed away on Christmas Eve, the morning of, right? And it was such a crazy time. But what was so neat is because we had built this business a very specific way, we had the business sold in less than 30 days. We had a really amazing offer that we were able to take. We were able to transfer all the assets because we had it built knowing that these things can happen. But because we had this built a certain way, it also allowed my father to enjoy the business. And I'm going to start to explain what that looks like for all of you, but I still want to shift this mindset for just a quick moment. I want to be very clear. Again, I've said it multiple times, and I'm going to say it again. Running your business on enterprise value does not mean you need to turn around and sell your business tomorrow. That is not what that is to entail. This is also how you keep score, and often it's the same things you work on that allow you to transfer a business. It is the same things you work on to remove owner dependency, which will therefore allow you as the owner to enjoy the business more. That is actually what measuring enterprise value does. And I want to go back to this real estate analogy. For those of you in the room that have sold a home before, I've had the opportunity to sell multiple. There's this moment where you declutter the house. Maybe you all have experienced this. You declutter, you do the honey-do list, you get it all really nice, spick and span, just absolutely beautiful. And you sit down with your significant other, you look at each other in the eye and you say, why did we not live in our house this way? Why did we not enjoy this ourselves? Why did we wait to get everything done for the next buyer? Why was that our mindset? Well, it's the same thing for all of you in your business. Don't wait and do the classic 1 year before I think I'm going to exit, try to put all the different pieces together. Build it this way from day one. So if it is involuntary, you're set up and you take care of your livelihood as well as anyone else that you're connected with that you're responsible for. Or option two, right? You don't have to sell it, but it's so much easier to run the business. Also, it's going to help you drive decision making. For instance, it's really hard to make the right decision when you're only looking through the eyes of revenue and profit. But when you start to go, well, what's my business worth? Should I be investing in this? It starts to make more sense. And again, for those of you that maybe have done some home projects, remodeled a kitchen, remodeled a bathroom, there's probably a chance that you've maybe gone on Zillow or gone on one of the real estate apps, said, well, how much are houses worth in my area that have updated kitchens? Will I actually get my money back? How much should I invest into these areas? And I'll give you a really clear example. A lot of times I'll come into a business and I'll see that somebody's built out an amazing Salesforce integration into their company as their CRM, and they've just paid for the Cadillac, but they have one sales rep, two sales reps, right? The amount you just spent does not match the actual value of the company. You are not going to get enough money out of that return at that point or that journey of the life cycle of the business. So it's vital that not only are you using enterprise value to understand how to keep score, but it also allows you to drive better decision making because you start to measure what is the company worth and is it continue to become worth more and more and more. I can't tell you how many companies we've worked with where we've actually pulled down profit, put additional infrastructure in place to make the business way more fun and easy to run. But because of that, got way more multiples on the potential transaction, which made the company worth that much more money with a little bit less profit. It's not always just revenue and profits that speaks to how the business is doing. And so for those of you that hear me rattling on and on about enterprise value, here's the actual transaction that happens, right? When you measure, this is the equation. Everybody kind of understands this piece. Per industry, there's going to be a set multiple on average that's trading. What most people don't know is that the average multiple for an industry, that range is usually very wide. In fact, only in a few key industry categories, I've seen a flat multiple range. Most of the time, it's anywhere between, can be anywhere as low as a 1 to 1.5x, all the way up to like a 13 to 15x for the high outliers. It really depends on the health of the company. So you have an industry multiple times by your 12-month trailing. It's normally going to be on profit unless you're a startup with really fast growing revenue, or if you're in the SaaS side of the business with a really fast growth rate, then you might be able to trade on revenue. But most of the time it's trading on profit, really therefore EBITDA. And then you're timesing that by health score. This is the part that everybody misses. They read the blogs, they read everything about how this company sold at this multiple, and they go, that must be what I'm going to get. Think again. All right. Not always. The reality is that although there might be a standard industry multiple, when you get to diligence, this is where you can sometimes get discounted. This is where things can sometimes start to fall apart on the price. And we've seen hundreds of companies get under, a letter of intent with somebody at a certain multiple, and that multiple can cut in half by the time they actually get to the final papers. Because as they look under the hood of the business, it's so dependent on the owner, and it's not actually driving what it needs to drive for it to be a self-sustaining organization. That is running enterprise value. And so another visual way of looking at this, right? This company is a $12 million revenue business. They should be able to run closer to about 20 million of a value. But right now they're only worth about 4.2 million, because when we came absolute mess, in no way was this going to sustain the transferability of the ability to make that path for somebody to be able to purchase the company. That is where you're going to get tore up. And it's the same thing that has this owner working 80 hours a week, sacrificing with friends and family, and not really enjoying the business. They're more of a victim of the business versus being able to supercharge and run the business. And so in order to help measure the health, right, that's what we really have to understand. Your revenue and your profits are what they are. You're going to continue to focus on growing those. The industry multiples, you're really not going to change the market. You can just keep an eye on it. What you really have control on is when people do come to look at the business, how do they visualize your business itself? And that's where we break down the health. And we have these 6 universal areas of a business. This is called our propeller. And what we think about a lot is we're all getting on a plane, which is our business. We've got our staff in their seats. We've got our leaders walking up and down as the flight attendants. We're in the cockpit, right? We're getting ready to take flight and get to our next destination of growth in the company. And our propellers turn on. And what you want to think about is, do you have a large enough propeller, meaning the financial engine? Do you have enough cash in the bank? Do you have the right amount of finances to support you on that journey? And you see how the financials kind of swirl through all the different blades and hold them all up. Then on the growth side of the business, you have sales and marketing. We all know what that is. On the capacity side, we have leadership running the company, as well as then the recruiting, bringing in the right A talent. And then all around the perimeter here, we have productivity. Think of this as tech enablement. Think of this as SOPs and systems around guardrailing the company, guardrailing these other areas that are allowing this to have a really fast flywheel. Now, I'm going to ask if all of you would like to get on my plane, right? If I had a sales score of an 8 to 10, so maybe my propeller came out to here, if you see my cursor, my marketing is a 2 out of 10, my recruiting is a 4 out of 10, my leadership is a 6 out of 10, my financials is a 4 out of 10, my productivity is a 2 out of 10. All of a sudden, that is a non-symmetrical propeller. We are going to hit a ton of turbulence when we're up there, when we're taking flight. And a lot of times people build their business either through growth or through capacity. Rarely do we find somebody who's good at both. Most entrepreneurs that we have the opportunity to work alongside, their growth, they're really good at the sales and marketing side, and they're always trying to backfill the production of it, or they're really, really good on the capacity production side, and then they're weaker on the growth side. And then as the company grows, it becomes a teeter-totter. And all of you should start to now be thinking about your own situation, where when you're running the business, sometimes it's like, grow, we just got to figure out more sales and marketing. We just need to get more leads or more business in the door. Okay, wait, now we can't keep up with it. Everybody stop focusing on sales and marketing. Come over here. Let's focus on how to produce. And you start to get this teeter-totter effect that most businesses go through. Well, we've been able to take these 6 universal areas and break it down into 24 value drivers. These value drivers is what you'll be discounted on. If you were to go sell, how you will understand if you have a healthy organization that will allow you to run this business practically hands off. If you think about it, right, getting to a place where you're hands off in your business is zero different than being able to get the top multiple when selling, because that's what they're measuring. What's the transferability of the business? And so as we dig in, I'm not going to be able to go through all 24 today, but I just picked a couple that I thought would really resonate with those on the call today to get you started. So one of the first value drivers we talk about, our value driver number 3, is that we have a 12-month micro cash flow pro forma and a 5-year macro forecast for revenue, expenses, gross margin, and profit. So just sit back for a second. Do you have, right, the next 12 months, month over month, in detail, broken down with exactly where your cash position is going to be over the next 12 months? By the way, you shouldn't be putting that document together. You should be having somebody else run that document and presenting it to you. As well as then, do you have the next 5 years forecasted and laid out that's actually driven back to some data from your 12-month projections? Most people run financials historically. If you can't show your financials historically, you can't even have it to see at the table if it is ever time to sell. But going forward, that's the biggest thing they're looking for is what's the vision casted? What's been the growth rate? What opportunities lie ahead? So you have to have this in place if you're ever trying to hold tension to have the highest multiple and be worth the most amount. Value number 8, we have a strong sales team with an effective compensation structure, and the owners do not produce sales themselves. If you want to get a high multiple and be worth the most amount as an organization, the owners cannot be involved in any of the sales process. You have to build yourself out of that sales environment. So if you're still there, this is an opportunity to take a stance and go, maybe over the next 12 to 18 months, can I work to remove myself from the sales offering? And can I get other people running this without me involved? That needs to be in place before you would ever think about going to the market. A third value driver here. This is one of my favorite, number 21. Obviously, we have a very deep-rooted relationship with Trainual. They're the best in the biz as it comes to having standard operating procedures and the training built for every person in every role within every department of the company. Well, getting all of this, Chris talks about this all the time, getting everything out of the owner's head and onto a really simple video and copy that other people can get in bite-sized forms is vital. I call these the standard operating procedures. If you don't have these documented and these systemized across all the departments, you're going to have a hard time, one, running the business. You're always going to be on call. The dependency is going to be through the roof. Secondly, the other thing you're going to deal with is that when you go to market or when you try to go have an opportunity to have your enterprise evaluated, they're going to look at this and go, how do you do this? You should be able to send a link. That's it. Not, well, let me explain it to you. The more you have to explain, the more fear you're going to create of how complicated it is. This is all about how simple something can scale. These are going to be the guardrails, right? When you think about SOPs, those are going to be the guardrails. I always like to give this visual. You're on a highway. You're going around the mountains. Either your team members or your client base is on this highway speeding through your processes. You're going to be taking some sharp turns. You need them to stay in those guardrails. The least amount of one-offs that happen in the business, both internally and externally, is how you actually measure the health of the company. Your job is to be boring. You just heard me say that. Your job as the owner is to create a boring company where no thrills and nothing happens. It's repetitive, it's predictable, it's simple. The faster and easier you dial into that, the faster and bigger your enterprise value becomes inside of your organization. Another quick example of a value driver, just to give you some examples of the things you have to master. The owners of the company are working on the right priorities for the business while not exceeding 50 hours per week. One of the worst things you can do as an owner when you go to sell the company is talk about how many hours you work and how dedicated you are and how successful you are at creating. In fact, when you go to the process of selling, the people who sell for the most are the people who answer things like, I have no idea, we're going to have to talk to my team. Shifts your paradigm a bit if you haven't explored this a bit. You should not be excited and ranting and raving that it's like you're the smartest person in the room or you're the one that has this figured out. That's not your job as the business owner. You're the quarterback. Your job is to put the right people in the seat and get them talking and get them driving without you. That's the biggest key. And that leads me, to this priorities, right? It's like you've heard this a lot, working in the business versus working on your business. As the owner, you should be on it, not in it. And so the more you can slow down and position yourself through this lens and get your team excited about the ideas of driving enterprise value, the faster you'll find yourself in a position to run full speed. My last value driver here is people responsible for each department with contingency plans to avoid key person dependencies. This is that owner dependency piece. And I like to ask this question a lot, right? Have you ever just said as a leader or as an owner in the room, gosh, if I could just duplicate myself, this would be so much easier. I just need to figure out a way to duplicate myself, and then I can move the business. And I guarantee you, some of you are sitting there shaking your head, yes, going, yes, I have definitely felt that. Well, if you have, and if you've said that to yourself, I want to give you a little bit of harsh reality. What you're really saying is, how do I get better as a leader? That's what you're saying. Because there are people out there duplicating themselves left and right. The ability to drive enterprise value is the ability to duplicate yourself over and over and over again. Always try to remember 20% of a business at all times is on fire. It's not your job to be a firefighter and get in there. Your job is to go out in front and make sure it can't catch on fire again in certain areas. That's the difference of a talented business who's driving on enterprise value and high growth versus a business that's stuck down in the weeds. Additionally, as an owner, once somebody can do something 70 to 80% as good as you, it's time to get out of there. It's time to not be in that seat, and you need to move to the next seat. So you have to really commit yourself to say, it's on me or on my key leaders that might be holding back dependency in this organization. And I want to give you just one fun thing on the way out here before I kind of talk you through next steps and we go to Q&A. I have this really fun equation I love to share with everybody whenever I get a chance. It's called the buying equation. And it's a way that I've helped owners realize that their ideas are not the best ideas. Yep, I know, I'm not too popular right this second. Let me say it again though. The owner's ideas are normally not the best ideas. Here's why, all right? Although your buy-in to the idea, the B, right? Although your buy-in to the idea is very high, the reality is the person that has to go execute and implement, you need their buy-in through the roof. So I'll give you an example. Let's say we have to get some type of a task done, and Chris was just telling me about how I got to go run up this mountain next to his office next time I'm in town. So we'll just call that we got to get to the top of his mountain. That's the execution. That's the E. All right. What makes up that is the quality of the idea times the buy-in of the idea will equal the execution of the idea. So my idea is I really don't want to walk up this mountain. Let's just get a helicopter. Let's go up there. We're in, we're out, we're done. All right. This quality of idea is a 9. I mean, it's brilliant. But when I go to the team who's really fitness oriented, really loves that, they look at me and go, I gave it a 2. Awesome. So I got an execution of 18. Quality of the idea was 9. I love this idea because it's mine. Buy-in of the idea for them, for my team, is only 2. So I got an execution of 18. Now imagine though, if I would have instead came and just asked the question, focus on the goal, and just said, we got to get to the top of the mountain. What's the best idea to get there? Chris looks at me and says, I'm going to run up that mountain. All right. Well, I think that idea actually is kind of crappy, but whatever. So Chris, I'll give the quality idea of a 6, nowhere near as good as my 9. The helicopter would have been more fun, but the buy-in from Chris is a 10. Why? Because it's Chris's idea. I just got an execution of 60%. Now, do you want to take the 60% execution or the 18% execution? This is my point. If you are struggling to get out of dependency and you feel like you are an answer hotline all day, every day, 1, get inside a Trainual, get everything out of your head, get them into the right SOPs and systems, and start getting this documented without you. Step 2, start leading through the buy-in equation. Realize that your job is to focus on the goal, not the path. Your job is to keep alignment to the goal, not get into the weeds and drive the path. These are the things that move enterprise value and make the company healthier and healthier. More importantly, allow the owner to be more hands-off, have more autonomy, have freedom, all the things that you said you wanted to have. Because it's time. If you are not experiencing quick scale, if you are not experiencing your own freedom truly that you set out for, maybe it's a chance to double down and run this business on enterprise value. That is where you can really start to focus in a different perspective of how to run the company. In worst case, if you do decide to sell, you're going to make a lot more money because you do it. And I don't think any of us are going to say no to that. So how many of you, going back to the chat, how many of you would be open to exploring what it means to lead the business on enterprise value? Because I'm going to give you a couple steps you can follow to get started completely on your own. But just curious, did I change anybody's perspective today? Just if I can get a couple on chat to give me the validity, since I'm not able to see anybody's screen and see all the heads nodding. Perfect. Monica, thank you. I got one yes. All right, Ethan, thank you. Dan, all right, now we got some more pulling through. Thank you, everybody. We want to run the business on enterprise value. Well, here's the 4 steps you have to do to get started. Step 1, you have to go figure out your baseline. You've got to identify the current enterprise value of the company. That way you have a place to start from. Step 2, then you're going to create a really clear plan. This is going to be essentially assessing all the value drivers that you know could have discounts on the diligence, and you're going to work those back and figure out which ones do you really need to focus in on. Number 3, then you're going to work through strategic improvements and actually create roadmaps and implement. And from there, then you're going to keep measuring results. Now, we provide a platform that actually allows you to do that if you ever have any interest to do so. But ultimately, by getting the baseline, creating the plan, and then getting improvements, you'll be in the right space. So for us, we want to help you with this. We do this for everybody and any entrepreneur because our whole vision is a world made better by entrepreneurs. We want to raise awareness around what these statistics are, how few of businesses are actually selling at the value they have a desire to sell for. And we also want to empower you to give you the tools and help prioritize your team to work yourself out of the business, remove the dependency, and have the most enjoyable businesses possible with the highest value possible. So we actually have an assessment that's at no cost. We've worked out with Chris and the Trainual team to let all of you have access to this. So we will give you access to it at the end of this call, okay? So what it is it's an online tool. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes, and you're going to get a 25-page curated report that tells you your industry multiples, helps you assess your health score against the 24 value drivers. It's also going to allow you to then pick yourself which of the ones you want to focus on the most. And we give you a bunch of extra added reading materials around how to think about the business, how to communicate it with your team, etc. This is what some of the pages look like, just to give you an idea of what the assessment is in terms of giving you your scores and showing you where to focus at. And it even helps you understand the gap, meaning if you grew no more revenue and no more profit, but you just increased the health of your organization, this is how much money you could be leaving on the table when it comes to measuring enterprise value. So we call this the value gap that's actually inside the business. And for some, it's shallow. For some, it's very wide. Once we now have your baseline on that assessment, if you decide to raise your hand and say, hey, we would love your help, right? Because we don't charge anything for that assessment, but you say, hey, we would love your help. We'll actually come along. We'll spend a couple hours, again, at no cost with you, and we'll slow down using our software and actually help you plan out your enterprise value. We'll put together from start to finish how many years, when you think you might want to have an exit, or when you think what you want the business to be worth. I don't care if the exit's 20 years away. We'll help you line that up. We'll help you measure the health score and get you an automated dashboard that helps you visualize where you're at to communicate with your team. We'll even help you work that all the way back into the leading indicators of revenue, profit, and all the KPIs. We do this in a couple-hour meeting, again, that we give away for free at the time of our assessment if you have a desire to look at that with us. Now, why do we do that? Well, this is where our services come in full transparency. And I will warn you, one of 2 businesses that go through that process with us raise their hand and ask us to come alongside them to help on improvement. So I always like to give that statement in case you try to do the assessment. But what we do is we come alongside, work one-on-one to build out all the roadmaps, give you a step-by-step direction of what to take. You then take all that SOPs that you get built and put into Trainual. That's why Trainual and us have such a great relationship together. And then we even give you software that helps you run all the meetings. So all your leadership meetings are going to be transparent and pulling the goals and all the accountability all the way back, connecting enterprise value all the way down to the most micro KPI metrics that you're assigning with your team members on a daily basis. This is about taking your business to a whole other place. And for us, we then measure the ROI along the way to help make sure that you know exactly how much enterprise value has grown by or not grown by, and even a change log of every single thing that has changed inside the business along the way. Imagine going to sell your business like selling a car, and you can show every oil change. That's how you maximize value. So today, the best thing I can offer you is a free opportunity just to figure out where is your multiple. It's a quick assessment. Strongly encourage you to take it. We're going to throw that in the chat for everybody to jump in as we go to Q&A, but strongly encourage you to start there, fill out the form. We'll send it to you. And then again, if it makes sense, we'll even sit down for a couple hours and help you analyze it and build a plan again at no cost. So appreciate you coming out. Chris, I'll bring you back up here for Q&A, but I have to leave with my favorite quote before we do that. It's actually by Dr. Seuss. I have two small children, so I'm become obsessed with Dr. Seuss. It's my favorite quote that I try to live my life and I teach others to live by as well. No one said it would be easy. They just said it would be worth it. These value drivers are not easy. They can sometimes take 6, 12, even 18 months to get in place inside the organization, which is why you have to start now. But boy, will they be worth it if you make the investment.
All right. Thank you, Casey. Really appreciate the information. And I was commenting there in the chat as well, but I think the shift to thinking about enterprise value is a huge one because we've been conditioned for so long to just track revenue. Like the Inc. 5000 is all about revenue. And then you
Always,
go
yeah.
and then you go a level deeper and it's like, yeah, but revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, cash is king, whatever. But you never hear enterprise value is like the emperor, like
Yeah.
there's,
Yeah.
and,
Enterprise value is the thing.
yeah,
Is that
yeah.
how that should go? Yeah.
So really interesting, and thank you for sharing all this. All right, so for everyone in the audience, if you haven't already been putting your questions into the Q&A, but you have questions, we've got like another 15 minutes here, and Casey is a renowned expert in enterprise value and building enterprise value and running a firm of advisors that help thousands of companies build their enterprise value. So please take advantage of this time and put your questions there in the chat. But I'm going to get it started with a question I had, which is, if I'm thinking as the owner about the what a business is worth, the enterprise value, is that something I'm sharing with the whole company? Is it something I talk about with the leadership team? Like, how do you get other people in the company motivated to drive enterprise
Yeah.
value?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? Because it can be sometimes awkward to go to your team and say, hey, we're going to focus on enterprise value because I might sell in 5 years and I'm going to collect all this money. That doesn't always doesn't always go that well. Now you can get around that. I love when people start to put like option pools and different things to kind of tie in key leaders, Chris, into the organization. So you're actually having a more open conversation, around the opportunity. But here's my advice. Enterprise value does not have to be anything to do with exit. You have to educate the same thing. This is about understanding the value of the company. You don't even have to tell them that you're aiming for a certain value of the company.
Hmm.
You can instead just focus on the health score, right? Just help them understand that we have these growth goals we want to achieve. And here's a health score that we're going to measure against these value drivers of how the outside market will depict the value of our company. And so let's take a look as an organization, as a leadership team, and let's pick these 20. Who owns each one of these 24s in what role? Okay, now we know who owns them. And then go one step further. Go, okay, great. Now, what's the need or what do we need to do inside the business to become the best in class in these value drivers? And now let's put them in order. What order do we need to go in? And now you have a really great strategy to work alongside with your team. So absolutely bring this to your leadership team. Don't hide behind the idea. They all know you're potentially out to sell the business or make money. That's why you started a company. And the more you can actually just lean in and be authentic to that and ask for their help, the faster I find it comes.
Yeah, I think the idea of sharing your enterprise value is more useful than sharing your revenue. And a lot of companies I talk to are, they're transparent about revenue and they set revenue
Right.
goals. But then behind the scenes, if people see the revenues going up and, what is that? What's in it for me? That doesn't necessarily mean the health of the business is improving. Like, what if your
Right.
company if your values decreasing, if your
Yeah.
customer concentration's changing, if your profit's changing, it's enterprise value is a better thing to share and track.
I mean, Chris, we have a company that, I personally worked with. The story started 8 years ago. We met the company. Company was doing about 3 million in top line revenue. So a little bit on the smaller side. And $2 million of that revenue was Amazon as a client.
Wow. Wow.
Like it was, and Amazon just had their way with this professional service firm. And we convinced the owner, after a lot of convincing, to fire Amazon and lower the business down to $1 million rev shop versus 3 million.
Wow.
In that moment, the business actually became worth more. We turned around, jumped them up to 17 million because we got focused on the right, client persona and actually drove the business and the right value drivers. And he turned around and sold it, right, for 34 million bucks, right? And that was all in a 6.5 year period.
Wow.
But he was stuck for years and years and years. And he was so excited. He would tout and tell everybody, I work with Amazon. I do this for Amazon. Well, come to find out, that was actually the thing that was killing him. It
Yeah.
was Amazon.
Yeah.
Right. So I always just like to share those stories so people maybe can kind of get it back to their own world that, again, more of something is not always better. Like it's got to be a complete puzzle piece. And that's why thinking through transference, how easy is it going to be to transfer this asset? That's actually the lens you have to always think through.
Yeah, we've gotten some exposure, probably more than most, to tracking enterprise value as a SaaS company that's gone through rounds of VC funding and
Oh,
talked to
yeah.
private equity. Like I feel in it, but I talk to so many businesses that have never raised outside money. They've never had an outsider take a look at the business and give
Yes.
them that pulse test. So when you're working with companies, how frequently would you say you're putting a stake in the ground and testing that EV?
Cadence wise is about quarterly. Anything
Okay.
other than that gets a little too aggressive. We're really kind of pulling back once a year to look really in depth, but quarterly we're reviewing kind of where are we at? Has anything moved in the market? What's shifted? Again, our software does it automatically for everybody for a quarter if you're working alongside us. But if you're not working alongside us and you're just focusing on driving enterprise value, I would come back and tie this into like your quarterly rocks meeting if you're running on EOS, or you're bringing it into some type of quarterly function that's going to help you keep an eye on the prize so you don't lose sight of setting the right priorities that you're going to go after each quarter.
Okay. You mentioned Amazon as an example of, having one big concentrated customer that was actually tanking value. When you work
Yeah.
with companies, are there a couple, maybe two or three other things that you see are real common pitfalls in lowering their valuation?
I mean, the number one that we've talked about today was the dependency, right? That
Yeah,
hands
sales and
down. I mean, it's for whatever reason, right? As owners, we all had to have this arrogance and this confidence to like pierce through building the business in the early days. And the problem is we can't always turn that off, right? Once we start to scale and get the business larger, to actually sit back and let other people drive your baby, right, is very, very challenging. And so often what we see where most people get really discounted is because they show up and the owner can start the buyer can realize that the owner is doing everything and they have their hands in everything. So even if you're like, no, no, I'm just like making decisions strategically, like, yeah, that's owner dependency, right? Like it's like you should actually be empowering others to make those decisions. Your job is to help carve the vision and carve the path. That's your
yeah,
job, or be hands off and get the heck out of the way. That's actually when you know it's the opportunistic time. I love when I meet business owners, Chris, that can come out and say, I was doing the business. I actually ended up hiring a driver of the company. Now I do this one function inside the company. I think there's, some people view that as a negative. That's actually the biggest compliment you could ever give to that person as an owner, because you truly built something bigger than yourself that's going to sustain without you. That's true freedom. So I would say between dependency, you already brought the customer concentration as a big one. I'd say if I had to pick a third, like what's the absolute top? The third one that comes to mind is actually those SOPs. Like the reality is, if you do not have training and onboarding and all the SOPs clearly documented, again, think about like new owner comes in. You need to be able to imagine that you're just literally saying, here's my login to Trainual. You now have everything, right? It has to be that simple.
yeah.
And if you don't create it that simple, you're probably too close to the business and you need somebody as a third party to come in, which we do all day, every day, and help simplify this business down to make it super scalable.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to use the example of, imagine buying a restaurant and they didn't give you any other recipes. And it's just like, oh,
Right.
I don't know. I ate
Yes.
here a year ago and I kind of remember how to do this from last year, but like it's crazy. You can't even fathom. What do you mean? I don't have the recipes? How am I supposed to run this business? And that's really what
Right.
your SOPs are. So that's a perfect segue actually into Monica's question in the chat. She says, do you have any benchmarks or any guidance on how much a company's valuation valuation can rise when its core processes and procedures are fully documented. So is there like an average percentage bump in EBITDA multiple or in sale price? And I've heard
Yeah.
something anecdotal, but I'm curious what you think.
Yeah. So again, we have 24 value drivers. This would be one of those value drivers. As far as what's the weight of that one value driver, I would say that it's probably going to be anywhere from 15 to 20% of the value that's reviewed. Um, Again, you're really going to, when you go out to sell, right, and you go through the multiple conversation, everybody's going to give you the base right away, like the minimum multiple that everybody can trade on. It's called how many turns can you get in addition to that, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really like you should be able to get another turn or even two when you have that. And that usually will equate to a 15 to 20% bump that you start to see across the table. Again, every single conversation is different. Every business and industry can be different, which is why you need somebody who's an expert. We've done this with thousands and thousands of companies to look under the hoods, measure this, and understand the outputs. So, Monica, I would encourage you to look at this more for like, let's look specifically at the business. But in overall aggregate, I would imagine you're going to see something pretty consistent between 15 to 20%.
I was going to say anecdotally, I've heard exactly the same thing, like another turn or two. And so
Yes.
another one times revenue or one times EBITDA or whatever it's trading at. And this is stories I've been told from Trainual clients that have sold and said, my buyer actually told me that it was
Mhm.
worth this much more to them because it was turnkey. And when you
Yeah.
don't have everything written down and just think about the diligence process and the difference for a buyer when you're just giving them a login and saying, "Yep, it's all there,"
Oh,
versus
absolutely.
having to answer 100 questions and say, "Let me scrap together this paper. Let me write it for you right now." It's night and day.
Well, and not only that, again, with almost 50% of the businesses selling on an involuntary basis, you don't know when you're selling. I mean, I can't tell you how many clients we have that all of a sudden just a strategic buyer knocks on their door, offers them some absurd amount of money if they have X, Y, and Z in place. They have it with us because they work alongside us. They show it to them and deal's done. Like they had no intent of selling. It's just the number was too big. How could you say no? And it was actually what was better for that brand, for the people of the brand to give more promotion because they're going to take it and scale and grow it even further.
Yeah.
So it really is just a choice to run your business on enterprise value because you never know when that opportunity is going to strike, which is why you want to have all those SOPs in place.
Casey, I've got one more question for you, and it's kind of a personal takeaway for everyone, which is how do you know what number is the right number? Like if you're thinking about someday selling your business, what guidance
Yeah.
would you have for people to go back and workshop what their goal is?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in a concept called a freedom point. Okay. So, what you want to do is you want to think about what is the point for you in which you will have freedom. It's been pretty much proven that owners will leave when three things are figured out. Okay. Their business is going to get taken care of. They feel like the business can get taken care of, right? Their finances are going to get taken care of, but then also their personal purpose is going to be taken care of. A lot of people never leave the business and they never sell because they actually can't figure out what they're going to go do next. And they're afraid they're going to lose a bit of their identity if
Hmm.
they sell the business. This is, again, if people are on video, you'd start to see the head nods, right? Because most people can relate to that. There's a lot of identity wrapped up for all of us as entrepreneurs. And so what you have to think about is on the business side, you got to find the right buyer, build it the right way, you'll handle that. On the personal side, you need to think about what do you want to go do next. And you also need to take the cost of that into account when you are figuring out your freedom point. So it's not just going to your wealth manager and figuring out how much money do I want at retirement or what do I want to leave my children or, depending on the scenario of yours, it's not about that. It's also got to be, but what am I going to go do next? And how will this fund my ability to go do what is next? And if that's sit on the beach for the next 25 years and enjoy life, that's fantastic. Good for you. No judgment. It's just make sure you're very clear to figure out the number you need. Then you can work it backwards through this equation of, okay, well, what's that transaction have to be
Yeah.
pre-tax? Then you can work that back into, okay, well, how much profit do I have to get this to, assuming this health score and assuming this multiple? It's just math at that point. And now you just become a laser target. And if it doesn't increase the value of the company, every decision you make, the answer is no, no, no. And what happens is you actually find yourself, I get asked a lot on podcasts, Casey, how have you hit Inc. 5000 6 times in a row, knock on wood, I think we'll be their seventh this year. I tell them all the time, I go, honestly, I've just gotten really good at saying no. I think that's why we keep getting on the list. I just keep saying no to stuff, right? That's
Yeah.
actually the key. Say no, right? Simple, boring business creates massive growth and scale. Try not to forget that.
Addition through subtraction. All right. Well, I love that tip. And so, for everybody listening, go and do that math problem for yourself. Figure out what your freedom point is. I love the suggestion. And even if you don't intend to sell the business, I've had people that friends of mine have decided to sell their company because they realized they could just put that money to work, invest it in the market, make 5, 10, 15%, and not have the operational headache of running a big business. But that decision is totally up to you. You may get purpose, like Casey was saying, out of what you're doing. You may want to make a bigger impact in the world. You may want to run this business forever, but you don't know when one of these things is going to happen to force you to liquidate or force you to sell. And so being prepared is a smart choice. So Casey, you've provided some awesome guidance. I really appreciate it. For anyone that didn't see the link in the chat, click on that link, fill it out if you want to go through and do your assessment for your company. Casey and his team are great at that, or just send them a DM with your information. You can also just go to Cultivate Advisors and look them up, tell them that Trainual sent you, and I'm sure they'll take great care of you. Casey, thank you so much for joining, and this was super valuable.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Good luck, everybody. Remember, it's not always easy, but it's going to be worth it.
All right. Take care, everyone.